This story was set in Jackson, Mississippi, United States. This woman was Abilene Clark, and she worked in the house of a woman named Elizabeth Leafolt, a young mother who didn't seem to care about her small child, as it could be seen that almost all the housework, from cleaning up to caring for the child, was done by Abilene while she spent her time with her friends, proven when she planned to invite her friends to come to the house to play cards that afternoon. Meanwhile, there was another maid named Minnie Jackson, an amazing cook who worked in the house of a woman named Hilly Holbrook. Hilly herself was the friend of Elizabeth who was invited to play cards, and she brought her mother and Minnie there. Somewhere else, there was also a woman named Skeeter Phelan who had just graduated from the University of Mississippi. She aspired to be a writer, but at that time, she could only get a job writing a cleaning advice column at the Jackson Journal newspaper office. That afternoon, she was on her way to Elizabeth's house to play cards, as Elizabeth, who turned out to be her childhood friend, had invited her, along with another friend of hers named Jolene. During the game, Skeeter was a bit bothered seeing how her friends treated their maids, who were black women. At that moment, Hilly was busy telling how annoyed she was when she found out that Minnie often used her house's toilet and said that black people carried different diseases from white people. Skeeter got even more bothered when she heard that Hilly said she was initiating a law that required every white household to have a separate toilet for their black maids. Hilly then told Skeeter, who worked at the newspaper, to publish her article. After the event was over, Skeeter invited Abilene to help with her job and also apologized for what her friends had said earlier. At that moment, Skeeter revealed that she used to have a black maid named Constantine, who suddenly quit her job at one point. She then told Abilene that she wanted to know what happened, so she asked Abilene for help to find Constantine's contact. Skeeter had tried asking her mother about it, but her mother always changed the subject. Skeeter didn't give up finding information yet, so during dinner with her family, she asked her father the same thing about Constantine, and her father said that Constantine quit because she wanted to move to Chicago to live with her family. But Skeeter was not satisfied with her father's answer, so she cornered her mother by guessing that her mother must have fired Constantine, and she immediately showed that she was against it because Constantine had worked for 30 years in their house. She deeply loved Constantine because the maid was the one who raised her when she was little. She was even closer emotionally to Constantine than she was to her own mother. Even though Constantine was nothing more than her babysitter, she played more of a parental role than Skeeter's own parent. One morning, an idea crossed Skeeter's mind. She suddenly called a publisher named Elaine and said that she wanted to write a book from the perspective of the maids in the South. She explained that these black women had raised white children to be successful people in society, yet the irony was that they could not even use the same toilet in the house. Upon hearing that, Elaine admitted that this was an angle she had never heard of, and she warned that no one would help or want to talk for her research, especially since this was Mississippi, and segregation was still going strong there. But Skeeter insisted that she already had a maid who would talk to her, so Elaine agreed and would wait for a draft from her. Upon hearing that, Skeeter was, of course, very happy. Some other day, after Abilene helped Skeeter with the cleaning column, Skeeter brought up her idea about interviewing black maids who worked in white people's homes to find out about their experiences, what they felt, how much they were paid, and so on. But Abilene said it was impossible for her to tell everything about her employers. However, Skeeter countered by saying that they could tell their stories anonymously so that their identities remained secret. Unfortunately, their conversation was cut short when Elizabeth suddenly came in with her husband. One day, a tornado hit Mississippi, and the electricity there went out because of the strong winds. At that moment, Minnie, who usually went to the bathroom outside, at that time needed to go pee and wanted to ask permission from Hilly to use the indoor toilet since the storm was brewing strongly outside, but she quickly backed down. However, seeing Minnie's strange behavior, Hilly's mother knew what was happening and told Minnie to use the toilet in the house. Unfortunately, Hilly forbade her and said that the rain outside was not that heavy, even though she knew the weather outside was clearly not good. Then, just when Minnie excused herself to go inside to make tea, Hilly became suspicious and went to the toilet, thinking Minnie was lying to her so she could use the toilet, and as she expected, Minnie indeed used the toilet and had just finished her business. Because of that, Minnie was fired, and she had to leave the house right away, even though it was stormy outside. Meanwhile, at Elizabeth's house, Abilene now had her own toilet, and it was outside the house. Elizabeth made Abilene her own toilet because she believed Hilly's claim about the disease that the black people brought. At that time, Elizabeth, as usual, left her young daughter, May, with Aibileen. And it was clear that May loved being with Aibileen and was even closer to her than to her own mother. She even called Aibileen her real mother. One morning, when she was going to take the bus home, Skeeter came to Aibileen again and asked about her interview offer for the book she wanted to write, but Aibileen still refused it. She was too scared to open her mouth. She explained that her cousin's car was even burned down just because he went to the polling station to vote in the election, showing that when black people tried to express their minds, they would be harmed. She worried that if she spoke out, her house might be burned down too. Upon hearing that, Skeeter understood the fear and instead gave her number to Aibileen in case she might change her mind. The fear that Aibileen experienced was not without reason. It was stated in the Mississippi regional regulations. Black people were not allowed to have the same rights as white people. Black people were not allowed to be in the same room as white people. They were not allowed to have the same books at school as white people. In salons and other public places, even public toilets, they were segregated. The worst part was that there should be no books or writings that supported the equality of the black race over white people. That was why Aibileen refused Skeeter's offer. One night, Aibileen got a call from Minnie, telling her that after being fired by Hilly, she went to Hilly's house the next afternoon with a pie to apologize. But the real reason she did that was for revenge, because Hilly was spreading gossip about her being a thief. Minnie didn't want to say exactly how she got revenge, but she made it clear that Hilly deserved it. The other day, Aibileen felt enlightened after listening to the pastor's sermon at church. The pastor preached that as humans, everyone must be prepared to put themselves in danger for other fellow human beings, just as Jesus did. That sermon changed her decision, and she decided to help Skeeter with her writing. She then called Skeeter to come to her house in secret so that no one would know about it. In short, the interview finally began. Skeeter asked several questions, but on that day, Aibileen chose to read her story to Skeeter instead, because every day she wrote her story down in a book as a prayer. Skeeter also asked if there were other maids who wanted to tell their story, but Aibileen said it might be difficult right now, especially for Minnie, who had just been fired and was still mad. Meanwhile, at Hilly's house, another maid named Yule May was working to replace Minnie. That morning, she tried to borrow money from Hilly for the education costs of her twin sons who wanted to go to college. She could actually send one of them to college with her own money, but she wanted both to get the same degree, so she dared herself to borrow money from Hilly. Unfortunately, instead of helping by lending Yule May some money, Hilly coldly told her to try and earn it. On the other hand, to help her husband pay the bills, Minnie was forced to drop her child out of school so she could work as a maid and help with their family's economy. She also taught her child what to do and what not to do when working with white people. Minnie, on the other hand, had to go through her days without a job until one day she got a recommendation from a white woman who refused to believe Hilly's gossip, and the woman was Celia. For years, Minnie had lived as a maid with rules and boundaries between black and white people, but Celia actually didn't care about that at all. She truly welcomed Minnie's arrival with a hug because this was the first time she had ever hired a maid. She said that she wanted Minnie to work only from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. because she didn't want her husband to know that there was a maid at home, as she just wanted her husband to think she did the chores herself. Upon hearing that, Minnie agreed to these conditions. On another day, Hilly held a meeting at her house and announced that her initiative about the separation of toilets for maids had reached the governor. She then asked about the article about her initiative to Skeeter, who should have been published in the newspaper a month ago. Faced with that question, Skeeter only said that it would be published as soon as possible. After that meeting, Hilly, Elizabeth, and Skeeter went together to a cafe. When they got there, Hilly said that she would set up Skeeter with a man named Stuart, because among the three of them, only Skeeter was not married, so she and Elizabeth made plans for her date with Stuart. Meanwhile, at Hilly's house, while cleaning, Yule May accidentally found a gold ring under the sofa. Driven by her dire need for money, she then pocketed the ring. Meanwhile, Skeeter still met Aibileen from time to time to get her story done. One day, Aibileen told Skeeter that she wanted to talk about May, Elizabeth's child, who slept with her diaper every night, and it would not be changed until Aibileen arrived home in the morning, no matter the condition, meaning the poor child might have slept with her feces all night. Upon hearing this, Skeeter became even more determined to write the book. Soon, while they were talking, Minnie suddenly came over and was shocked to see Skeeter there. As she was still sentimental about white people, and suspected Skeeter of only pretending to care about their race. However, Skeeter said that she just wanted people to know what they felt. Aibileen then told Skeeter that she didn't have to explain herself to Minnie. Upon hearing that, Minnie got irritated and quickly left. But when she was outside, she suddenly changed her mind and went back in, and finally agreed to join Skeeter's project. At first, Minnie wasn't friendly, but when she was invited to talk about cooking, like what she did every day, she couldn't stop talking, especially if it was related to Hilly, her former employer. They chatted until morning, and Minnie even suggested that they should invite other maids to join. Upon hearing that suggestion, Skeeter decided she would try to talk to them. On another occasion, Skeeter came to a restaurant to meet Stuart, the man introduced by Hilly and her husband. However, that date didn't end well because Stuart was fighting with someone and was a bit rude in his speech, leading to Skeeter leaving right away. Meanwhile, Minnie was getting more comfortable working without any pressure at Celia's house. She even taught Celia a lot about how to cook, and Celia was genuinely excited because of it. At the same time, Celia didn't even mind eating at the same table as Minnie, even though Minnie tried to tell Celia to eat at her own dining table. Later, Minnie reminded Celia to tell her husband about her, worried that her husband would shoot her dead if he found out by surprise. On the other hand, Skeeter often discussed the draft of the book she sent to Elaine in New York on a call. That one night, during the call, Elaine said that the stories of these two maids were still not enough. She said that at the very least, Skeeter should have a dozen maids who wanted to be interviewed. Then, after the call, Skeeter brought this up to Minnie and Aibileen. Minnie then said that she had invited about 30 other friends, but they were all scared and thought this was a crazy idea and too dangerous. Without enough people to interview, her book would never make it, so Skeeter was clearly nervous. But Aibileen encouraged her not to give up. She suddenly told Skeeter the tragic story of how her only child died. She told Skeeter that her child was hit by a car when he was carrying goods to the factory. The foreman where he worked then took him to the hospital by putting him in the back of a truck, and when they arrived, the foreman just put him down and then left. Unfortunately, there was nothing the hospital could do, so he was taken home and died at home, right in front of Aibileen's eyes. She then said that if Skeeter gave up, all they had written all this time would be gone, like her son. Days later on Sunday, Hilly held a party at her house, and as usual, everyone was present. On that occasion, Skeeter approached Yule May, who was washing dishes in the kitchen, and offered her an interview just like Aibileen and Minnie. But Yule May said that right now, her only focus was on getting money for her sons to go to college, so she couldn't join. Soon after, Hilly came in, and fortunately, there was no important conversation that came out of their mouths about the interview. Hilly then asked Skeeter if she was deliberately delaying publishing her article in the newspaper, but Skeeter quickly said that she was just busy taking care of her sick mother. The other day, Skeeter was woken up by her mother because Stuart, the man she met last week, had come back to see her to apologize and invite her to go on another date, so they eventually had dinner. At that moment, Stuart told Skeeter that he had read all of her articles in the newspaper and said that she was talented as a writer. He then said that whenever she wanted to write something, she had to write what she believed, and then he hoped that she would write something good. Eventually, Skeeter finally decided to work on Hilly's article about the separate toilets. However, when making the layout, she deliberately changed the words in the article to something else. And by the time the article was published, Hilly's garden was filled with old, unused toilets, sent there by people who followed the article's bizarre instructions. Hilly soon found out that this was thanks to Skeeter's article, and this became the beginning of their feud. At that time, Hilly saw May using one of the toilets at the yard, and that made her angry, and she immediately beat her in public. After that incident, Aibileen quickly calmed May down and tried to cheer her up. Meanwhile, at her house, Skeeter and her two maids watched the national news about a black activist named Medgar Evers, who dared to give a speech about fighting for black people's civil rights. Later that day, when Aibileen was on her way home using the bus, the driver suddenly stopped the bus and asked the black people on the bus to get off because in front of them, there was a shooting incident that caused a black person to be shot dead. When it was checked, the person turned out to be Medgar Evers, who was shot by a white citizen. Afraid the same thing might happen to her, Aibileen quickly ran back home. On her way home, Aibileen stopped by Minnie's house. Minnie was clearly worried about what would happen to them if they were caught working with Skeeter to make a book about the segregation. Seeing how scared her friend was, Aibileen tried to calm her down by saying that they would be more careful. They would only tell Skeeter about their own experiences instead of fighting for civil rights to try to minimize the risk. One day, when working at Celia's house, Minnie suddenly heard a desperate voice from upstairs, so she quickly checked on Celia in her room. When she entered the room from the bathroom, Celia desperately told Minnie to just go home, but she wasn't going to let her kind employer cry, so she broke down the door and discovered that Celia had just had a miscarriage. Seeing the urgency, Minnie tried her best to comfort her, telling her that her next pregnancy would definitely be successful and that she would eventually have a baby. On the other hand, when Yule May had just gotten off the bus, she was suddenly arrested by the police on charges of theft. It turned out that it was clear that Hilly was the one who had reported it, because she caught Yule May pawning her missing ring at the pawn shop. After Yule May's arrest incident, Skeeter was suddenly called by Aibileen to come to her house, and when she arrived, she was shocked that there were already dozens of maids besides Minnie and Aibileen there waiting for her. It turned out that the incident of Yule May's arrest had finally changed their minds, and they were now willing to tell Skeeter their stories for her book. They then began telling their stories, and from them, Skeeter found out that not all white people were like Hilly. Some were kind and treated them like human beings. After receiving a lot of information, Skeeter immediately sped up the writing process to meet the deadline given by Elaine. Elaine had also told Skeeter to put something personal in the book, namely the story of Constantine, the maid who raised Skeeter. On another day, Celia showed up at Elizabeth's house with a pie, where Elizabeth happened to be hanging out with her friends. When Hilly knew that Celia was coming, she immediately told everyone there to hide and ignore Celia at all, which clearly hurt Celia's feelings. Later, at Celia's house, Minnie told Celia that Hilly hated her because she married her ex-boyfriend Johnny, thinking that Celia stole Johnny from her, leading to their breakup, even though Celia had never done that. On that occasion, Celia noticed that there was a wound on Minnie's temple, and she immediately knew that Minnie was a victim of domestic violence, so she tried to treat her wound. Seeing how careful Celia at her, Minnie realized that only in this house was a maid treated like a human being, not as a slave. In short, because the segregation was getting more chaotic, Skeeter, Aibileen, and Minnie held a meeting. They were worried about what problems they would face if their identities in the book were found out, and what problems were waiting for them. So, in case that happened in the future, Minnie said that she needed guarantees that they would be out of trouble. It was then that Minnie shared her biggest secret. She said that after she was fired, she gave a homemade chocolate pie to Hilly, which she ate greedily, eating 2 pieces of. She then told Minnie that she could accept her back, but her salary would be deducted every week. At that moment, Hilly's mother also wanted a piece of the cake, but Minnie stopped her from eating it. Hearing how dare the maid before her was, Hilly rudely told Minnie to cut the cake for her mother. It was then that Minnie finally opened up about the secret recipe of that chocolate pie. She revealed that she had baked her own feces into the pie.
Mama can have a piece.
What you say? Eat my shit. 'Cause you just did.
This fact stunned Aibileen and Skeeter to the point of disbelief. Minnie added that Hilly's mother, who had laughed at her own daughter, also got her consequence. After the incident that day, Hilly sent her mother to a nursing home. Minnie then said that if this story was included, it would be a guarantee of their safety. When she saw the embarrassing news, Hilly would desperately cover up that this story was not from Jackson, Mississippi, because there was no way she would want to confirm that she had willingly eaten Minnie's feces. However, Aibileen and Skeeter still didn't agree. Faced with that refusal, Minnie then gave them an ultimatum. Either they added that story, or she would withdraw from the project. One day, at a fundraising event that was being organized by Hilly and her friends, Celia showed up. She was there to clarify, as she had told Minnie before, that she and Johnny got married after he broke up with Hilly, not because she had stolen him, however, because she drank too much. Celia vomited at the event and then quickly left with Johnny. Hilly's mother, who also came to the event, then replied to what her daughter had done to her. She brought the chocolate pie made by Minnie and told Hilly that she was clearly still upset because she had sent her there. The next day after the event, Celia told Minnie that this kind of life was not suitable for her, so she had decided to return to her village and leave her husband. Seeing the sadness in Celia's eyes to entertain her, Minnie finally told the whole story of the awful chocolate pie that Hilly ate. She then added that if she left Johnny, then Hilly would win over all of them, because that was what she wanted all along, for Celia to leave. Long story short, the 266-page novel draft Skeeter wrote was finally finished. But Skeeter said she still had one more story that had not been included, namely the story of Constantine, her missing maid. So, once again, she asked her mother what exactly had happened and how Constantine had stopped working for them after 2 decades. Her mother finally told the complete story. Back then, when her mother was elected chairperson of a women's organization for Jackson, Mississippi, the inauguration dinner was held at their house and was attended directly by the head of the central organization. During the dinner, Constantine's daughter Rachel came to visit her mother, but because she was embarrassed, Skeeter's mother told Rachel to go in through the back door. Regardless of what she was told, Rachel still went in through the front door to meet her mother. Unfortunately, the incident was considered impolite by the white guests, and Skeeter's mother was punished for such action. In the end, because of the encouragement of her friends, Skeeter's mother felt that she had no choice but to kick Constantine out of the house. Upon listening to the story, Skeeter was incredibly sad that her mother had treated Constantine like that. Skeeter's mother then continued her story. After she kicked Constantine out of the house, she said that she had tried to go to Constantine's house, but Constantine had already gone to Chicago to be with her family. She had even followed Constantine to Chicago to bring her back. But unfortunately, it was too late, because Constantine had already died. To know that such a horrible thing happened to Constantine, Skeeter was sad because it was through her that she learned many things. She was raised and taught about the value of life by black people, who were only called maids. Long story short, Elaine finally published the book Skeeter wrote from New York. The book was titled The Help. The author and the source of the stories in the book were, of course, disguised for security. Thousands of copies were soon released, even making it all the way to Mississippi. The royalty money was shared with Minnie Abilene and dozens of other maids who had shared their stories. Hilly's mother, who was in the nursing home, also read the book to the other elderly people, and she was shocked when she read the story about the revenge pie. She immediately realized and was sure that it was Minnie's story. That very night, she immediately called Hilly and told her there was a good book that she had to read, without telling her what it was about. The other day, when at the supermarket, Abilene and Minnie couldn't believe that someone was reading their book, especially since the person reading it was a white person. Seeing that, they were happy, but they also started to get nervous. Unfortunately, this success became the end of Skeeter's relationship with Stuart. What Skeeter wrote, even though he was the one who encouraged her to write what she believed in, was now the opposite of what he wanted. Meanwhile, this book suddenly went viral and was read by all black and white people, all curious about the contents of the book, including Hilly. And just as Minnie had thought, Hilly would desperately deny that the book was about a maid in Mississippi. One morning, Hilly received a check from Celia. At first, she was happy because she thought she had received a donation, but it turned out the check was an inside joke from Celia regarding the toilet revenge. Not accepting all of this, she furiously went to Skeeter's house and immediately said that she would sue her because she had already hired a lawyer. But Skeeter said that until she could prove anything, the book was safe, even though Hilly was certain it was she who wrote the book. Desperate for revenge, Hilly told Skeeter's mother about this, but unexpectedly, Skeeter's mother defended her daughter, which made Hilly unable to say anything but swallow her annoyance. Because of the book's success, Elaine wrote a letter to Skeeter, offering her a job as a junior editor at her company, meaning that she would have to move to New York. When Skeeter talked about it with her mother, she got support from her mother, who was proud that she had grown into a brave woman. Meanwhile, one day, when Minnie returned from shopping, Johnny, Celia's husband, unexpectedly came home that afternoon. Minnie immediately ran to call Celia asking for help, worried that Johnny would kill her, even though Johnny had no intention of hurting her at all. In fact, he was grateful because Minnie was his wife's friend, and with Minnie's help, Celia's condition was getting better. According to him, Minnie had saved his wife's life. He then invited Minnie inside. Upon entering the house, Minnie was surprised because Celia had prepared a special meal for her. It was the food she had cooked herself since early morning as a token of gratitude. Upon seeing that, Minnie thought that she would be fired, but instead, Johnny said that she could work in that house for the rest of her life. Minnie was so happy, especially after Johnny and Celia promised to treat her as a friend and not just a maid. Because of this job, she could finally bring all her children away from her husband, who was abusive, and start a new life. When Sunday came, Abilene went to church, only to be surprised because when she entered, everyone had gathered and clapped for her. They thanked her for what she had done. Everyone then signed the book as a sign of gratitude for Abilene. On the other hand, Skeeter was moved to see the book finally become something useful for many. On that occasion, she told Aibileen and Minnie about the job offer in New York, but she planned to refuse the offer because she was worried about their safety after what they had done. But Minnie and Aibileen told her to go because they would look after each other. They insisted that she should look for a better life in New York. Another day, when she came to work, Aibileen was called by Hilly, who was at Elizabeth's house that morning. She then accused Aibileen of stealing the utensils that she had lent to Elizabeth. Of course, this was a false accusation, and Elizabeth looked reluctant to carry out this plan. Hilly even told Aibileen that she was fired. She knew that she could not put Aibileen in jail because of the book, but she could put her in jail with a theft case. Annoyed with all of this, Aibileen finally put up a full fight. She loudly shouted and gave Hilly a stern look, and that made Hilly stunned and speechless. After years of working there, Aibileen finally decided to leave. May was truly sad because of her departure. She became the last child Aibileen had cared for, because after this, she chose to retire.
Oh, the fear.